The rain was a betrayal. It wasn't the soft, cleansing kind, but a hard, percussive assault that sought to find every crack in the battered frame of her 10-year-old sedan. Ilara Vance felt each drop as a personal affront. The car had died 2 miles back, a final sputtering sigh of surrender on a winding country road she barely remembered. Now she stood at a gate of imposing wrought-iron spears, a gate she hadn't seen since she was a girl. Her 2 children, Leo and Mia, huddled under the flimsy shelter of her coat, their small bodies trembling from the cold and the unspoken terror that had become the wallpaper of their lives. Leo, at 8, was trying to be brave, his small jaw set in a miniature echo of her own stubbornness. Mia, only 6, had her face buried in the fabric of Ilara's skirt, her silent sobs a vibration against Ilara's leg. They had been in the car for 6 hours, running on a tank of gas, a box of stale crackers, and the last frayed threads of Ilara's hope. She had left a note on the polished marble island of the kitchen she had designed. A simple note. I'm done. 2 words to summarize a decade of being erased. The estate beyond the gate was a place of myth in her family. The home of her great-aunt Isolde, a woman spoken of in whispers, a recluse who had never married and had cut ties with the rest of the family decades ago. Ilara was banking on a half-remembered childhood story, a kindness shown to her when she'd fallen and scraped her knee on this very drive. It was the thinnest of reeds to cling to, but it was all she had. She pressed the intercom button, the cold metal shocking her numb fingers. Static hissed back at her. She pressed it again, leaning in, her voice thin against the drumming rain. Hello, my name is Ilara Vance, Isolde's grandniece. My car has broken down, please. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just echo, it absorbs. The kind that settles in your bones and tells you you're alone. She was about to press the button a 3rd time when the blinding glare of headlights sliced through the downpour, pinning them like frightened animals. It was not a tow truck. The car was a sleek black Predator, a Range Rover so polished it seemed to repel the rain out of sheer arrogance. It slid to a halt just inches from them. The driver's door opened and he emerged, not with the hurried motion of a person trying to avoid getting soaked, but with a deliberate, proprietary stride. Marcus. He did not look at the rain. He did not seem to feel it. His expensive suit was already darkening at the shoulders, but his posture remained one of relaxed, infuriating ownership of the space around him. He had not updated the file. He was working from a version of her that had never been accurate, a version that would crumble, that would eventually come back. He always believed she would come back. Ilara, he said, his voice the familiar blend of feigned concern and underlying command. What is this? What are you doing here playing games? You had me worried. She did not answer. She pulled her coat tighter around the children, her body a shield she knew was woefully inadequate. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out, younger, dressed in clothes that were aggressively fashionable and utterly impractical for the weather. Chloe, the project manager Marcus had been spending his nights with. Her blonde hair was already plastered to her skull, but her smile was a perfect predatory slash of red. She sauntered around the car, her eyes, cold and assessing, landing on the children. "Oh, look at them," Chloe cooed, the sound sharp and brittle. "Poor little things dragged out into this mess." She knelt, her gaze never leaving Ilara's face, even as she spoke to the children. "It's okay, sweeties. Your mommy is just having a moment. She gets confused sometimes. But don't you worry. Daddy and Chloe are here now. We're going to take you home. Your real home. Your mom isn't coming back there." The words were a physical blow, a carefully calibrated strike designed to shatter the last of Ilara's composure in front of her children. Leo's hand, which had been clutching her coat, tightened into a fist. Mia began to cry in earnest, her small, frightened wails cutting through the sound of the rain. "Get away from them," Ilara said. Her voice was low, a rasp of fury and exhaustion. Marcus sighed. A theatrical performance of a long-suffering husband. See? This is what I'm talking about. You're hysterical. You're not fit to have them right now. He took a step forward, his hand reaching for Leo. Come on, son. Let's get out of this ridiculous situation. Ilara moved, stepping between him and her son. Don't touch him. His patience, always a thin veneer, snapped. The mask of concern dissolved, revealing the raw, ugly entitlement beneath. Don't be stupid, Ilara. You have no car, no money, nowhere to go. This little stunt is over. Get in the car. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the muscle, hard and punishing. She did not scream. She did not struggle. She simply stood there, the rain and her tears mingling on her face, her eyes locked on his. It was the same grip he'd used in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the spaces that were supposed to be safe. It was the grip of ownership. Let go of my arm, Marcus, she said, each word precise and cold. You have an obligation, he hissed, his face close to hers, his breath smelling of whiskey and rage. An obligation to me, to our family. This isn't a family, she whispered. It's a prison you built with my blueprints. His face contorted, a flash of pure fury. His hand tightened, and for a second, she thought he would strike her, right there in front of the children, in front of the unblinking eye of the security camera on the gatepost, and then a sound. It was not a loud sound. It was the quiet click of a heavy latch, a sound of such profound and solid finality that it seemed to cut through the storm itself. They all turned. A small, almost hidden pedestrian gate within the larger iron structure had swung silently inward. Standing in the opening, silhouetted against the warm light spilling from a gatehouse, was an old woman. She held a large black umbrella, her posture ramrod straight, her face a mask of serene disapproval. She looked at Marcus's hand on Ilara's arm, and her expression didn't change, but a coldness emanated from her that was more chilling than the rain. The lady asked you to let go of her arm? The old woman said. Her voice was not frail. It was like gravel and velvet, accustomed to being obeyed. Marcus, startled, momentarily loosened his grip. He laughed, a short barking sound. And who the hell are you, the groundskeeper? Mind your own business, Grandma. He turned back to Ilara, but the moment was broken. The dynamic had shifted. Behind the old woman, in the deep shadow of the stone archway leading to the main drive, a figure resolved itself from the gloom. He was not there, and then he was. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed to drink the light. He held no umbrella. He did not seem to notice the rain that was plastering his dark hair to his head. His stillness was absolute, a pocket of calm in the chaotic scene. It was the kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace, but from immense, coiled power. He was not performing. He did not rush. He simply was. All sound seemed to cease. The rain, the children's crying, Marcus's heavy breathing, it all faded into a dull background hum. The only thing that mattered was the man in the archway. His gaze was not on Marcus, or the children, or the old woman. It was on Ilara. It was a look of quiet, unnerving recognition. Marcus, whose entire life was built on reading power dynamics in a room, was suddenly, catastrophically out of his depth. He saw the suit, the stillness, the sheer imposing presence, and his bravado curdled into confusion. "Who's this?" he demanded, trying to reclaim control. The man in the archway took one step forward into the rain. He moved with an unhurried precision that was more menacing than any sudden action. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, finally shifted from Ilara to the point where Marcus's hand was still gripping her arm. He spoke. His voice was low, devoid of emotion, yet it carried over the storm with the weight of iron wrapped in silk. Security. It was not a request. It was a statement of inevitable outcome. From the manicured darkness on either side of the gate, two men materialized. They were dressed in simple, dark uniforms, their movements fluid and economical. They did not run. They did not shout. They moved with the silent, terrifying efficiency of professionals. One went to Marcus, the other placed himself between Chloe and the children. Marcus finally let go of Alara's arm as if it had burned him. He stared at the security guard approaching him, his face a comical mask of disbelief. "Hey, back off. This is a private family matter. You have no right." The guard did not speak. He simply placed a large, firm hand on Marcus's chest, halting his forward momentum completely. The other guard gently but immovably steered a spluttering Chloe back toward the Range Rover. The man in the suit, Julian Thorne, took another step forward. He stopped beside the old woman who inclined her head slightly. "Mrs. Gable," he said, a quiet acknowledgement. "Mr. Julian," she replied, her tone one of deep, unwavering loyalty. "The night is getting cold." Julian's gaze returned to Alara. The coldness in his eyes was replaced by something else, something she couldn't name. It was not pity. It was something closer to confirmation, as if he were seeing a complex equation finally resolve itself. "Mr. Vance," Julian said, his voice still unnervingly calm. Marcus flinched at the formal address. "You are trespassing. Your associate is distressing my guests. You will leave now." "Your guests?" Marcus sputtered, gesturing wildly at Alara. "That is my wife, and those are my children." Julian's eyes flickered to the children, who were now staring, wide-eyed and silent, at the unfolding drama. A flicker of something, a shadow of profound distaste, crossed his face as he looked back at Marcus. "She is standing at my gate in the rain with her children," Julian stated, as if explaining a simple fact to a dense child. "Therefore, she is under my protection. You are not." He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. The statement hung in the air, as absolute and immovable as the ancient stone walls of the estate. Chloe, from the car, shrieked, "Marcus, let's just go! This is insane!" Marcus was trapped. His public face, his authority, was being systematically dismantled in front of the one person he needed to control most. He made one last desperate gambit. He lunged, not at Julian, but toward Ilara again, a pathetic attempt to physically drag her away. He didn't make it 2 feet. The security guard moved with a speed that was shocking, intercepting him, spinning him around, and pinning his arms behind his back in one smooth, brutal motion. It was done without wasted effort, without anger. It was simply a task being completed. Marcus let out a pained, humiliated grunt. Julian Thorne did not watch. His attention was already back on Alara. He stepped forward, taking the large umbrella from Mrs. Gable's hand and holding it over Alara and the children. The sudden cessation of the rain on her head was a small, shocking mercy. "I'm coming," he said, his voice a low murmur meant only for her. It was not a question. It was a promise he had already fulfilled. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "My mother has been expecting you." Mrs. Gable, Julian's mother, led them through the gatehouse and into the back of a waiting golf cart, one of those silent electric ones, already covered against the rain. The sudden warmth and quiet were disorienting. Mia, exhausted and overwhelmed, had finally fallen asleep in Alara's arms, her small body a dead weight of trust. Leo sat beside her, rigid, his eyes darting, taking in every detail of the perfectly manicured grounds that flashed by in the cart's headlights. They did not go to the main house, the grand, imposing facade visible in the distance. Instead, Mrs. Gable directed the cart along a winding path to a smaller, though by no means small stone house nestled in a grove of ancient oaks. It glowed with a warm, welcoming light. "This is the old dower house," Mrs. Gable explained, her voice softer now. "It's more private, quieter." Inside, a fire was already crackling in a large stone hearth. The air smelled of beeswax, dried lavender, and something baking. It was the scent of sanctuary. On a low table, a tray was set with a pitcher of milk, small sandwiches with the crusts cut off, and a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies. It was an offering of such simple, profound understanding that it almost broke Ilara. There are rooms prepared upstairs, Mrs. Gable said, gesturing toward a wide, wooden staircase. Dry clothes have been laid out, for all of you. She looked at Alara, her eyes sharp but not unkind. The boy is strong. He gets that from you. The girl needs her mother. Take them up. Settle them. There is time for talk later. Alara could only nod, her throat tight with unspoken gratitude. She carried Mia, and Leo followed, his hand now tentatively clutching the back of her wet coat. The rooms were beautiful, decorated in calming shades of cream and blue. On the beds were soft pajamas, a blue set with rockets for Leo, a pink set with stars for Mia, and for her, a simple, elegant set of gray silk. Someone had anticipated not just their needs, but their very sizes. The quiet, invisible competence of it all was staggering. After the children were bathed, fed, and tucked into beds that smelled of sunshine and fresh linen, Ilara stood in the shower for a long time, letting the hot water wash away the rain, the cold, and the lingering feel of Marcus's grip. She put on the silk pajamas. They felt like a borrowed skin, a costume for a life she couldn't imagine. Downstairs, Julian was waiting for her. He was no longer in his rain-soaked suit, but in dark trousers and a simple dark gray cashmere sweater. He stood by the fire, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had not been sitting. She got the sense he was not a man who sat easily. "Please," he said, gesturing to one of two deep armchairs placed near the fire. "My mother has made tea." She sat, her body sinking into the soft leather. He passed her a delicate porcelain cup. The tea was chamomile. Of course it was. Everything was perfectly chosen, perfectly executed. It was both comforting and deeply unsettling. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little hoarse, "for everything. Your mother." "My mother has a deep appreciation for formidable women in untenable situations," he said, his voice flat. He took a sip of his own drink. "She also has excellent instincts." He paused, his gaze steady and direct. "She told me you would come." Alara frowned. "I don't understand. I haven't seen your mother since I was a child. I wasn't even sure she would remember me." "She remembers everything," Julian said. He moved from the fireplace and sat in the chair opposite her. He did not lounge. He sat, his posture erect, his presence filling the space. "And I have been expecting you, Mrs. Vance. Or perhaps, more accurately, I have been looking for you." The corporate, modern metaphor he used was one she understood perfectly. "You've been running my file." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a fleeting, almost imperceptible shift. "For the past 6 months, yes. Your husband Marcus has been trying to secure the Obsidian Tower contract from my company. It's the largest architectural commission in the city's history." Alara's blood ran cold. The Obsidian Tower, her magnum opus. The project she had poured 3 years of her life into, sketching on napkins, building models in the dead of night, refining every line, every curve. The project Marcus had presented as his own, casually, at a dinner party, to thunderous applause. "The initial proposal was brilliant," Julian continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "A truly generational design, visionary. But as the due diligence process continued, inconsistencies began to appear. Marcus was fluent in the language of the design, but not its grammar. He could describe the beauty of the facade, but he couldn't explain the engineering that held it up. He was a very good actor reading from an excellent script, but he did not write the script." He leaned forward slightly. "My team investigates everything. We found the original digital files for the design on a server registered not to his company, but to a private freelance account, an account under the name E. Vance. We found early drafts, notes, discarded concepts, the entire creative process, documented. It was the work of a singular, obsessive genius. It was not the work of Marcus Vance." Ilara stared into her teacup. She felt a strange, dizzying mix of violation and vindication. Someone had seen her. Someone had looked past the facade Marcus had built and seen the scaffolding she had erected. "So we started looking for E. Vance," Julian said. "It wasn't difficult to connect you. The problem was, you were legally invisible. Your name was on nothing, the house, the cars, the bank accounts, all Marcus. You were a ghost in your own life. We couldn't approach you without tipping him off and potentially putting you in greater danger. So you just waited? She asked, the question laced with a decade of accumulated bitterness. We prepared, he corrected gently. My legal team has been building a file, a counter-narrative. We have depositions from 2 of his former assistants, both of whom saw you doing the work. We have the server logs. We have a complete forensic analysis of the design's evolution. We have everything. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. All we were missing was you. I did not expect you to arrive at my gate in the middle of a storm, but I am not surprised. A system under that much pressure was bound to break. He stood and walked over to a heavy oak desk in the corner of the room. He returned with a single slim leather folder. He did not hand it to her. He placed it on the small table between them. Marcus will not go away quietly, Julian said. He will use the children. He will use the courts. He will try to paint you as an unstable runaway mother. He has already begun. He gestured toward the folder. This is an offer, not of a job, not yet. It is an offer of sanctuary. My legal team at your complete disposal. My security team, ensuring your and your children's absolute safety. A place to stay for as long as you need, with no questions asked and no obligations owed. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the man behind the fortress of wealth and power. She saw the quiet observer, the collector of facts, the man who did not act on impulse but on the overwhelming weight of evidence. You are safe here, Alara, he said, using her first name for the first time. It sounded less like an assurance and more like a declaration of a new and immutable fact. And from here, we will handle Marcus. The days that followed were a study in disorientation. Alara woke each morning in the dower house to a world that was both a paradise and a prison. The air was clean, the grounds were breathtakingly beautiful, and the silence was absolute. But it was a gilded cage, a place of profound safety that also highlighted her profound dependency. She did not like depending on anyone, least of all another powerful man. She spent her time recalibrating. She walked for hours, following the winding paths that crisscrossed the vast estate. She discovered a rose garden, a sprawling labyrinth of hedges, and a glass conservatory filled with exotic, impossible flowers. She did this with her children, relearning the simple rhythms of being a mother without the constant grinding pressure of Marcus's disapproval in the background. Leo started to lose the hard, watchful edge in his eyes. Mia started to laugh again, a sound Alara realized she hadn't truly heard in months. But she was not idle. She refused to be a passive recipient of Julian's protection. On the 3rd day, she requested a meeting. He met her in the main house's library, a cavernous 2-story room lined with books from floor to ceiling. I want to be involved, she said, her voice firm. She had dressed carefully, not in the borrowed silk, but in her own clothes, jeans, and a simple sweater she'd managed to salvage from her car. It felt important to be herself. In the legal strategy, I know Marcus. I know how he thinks, where he hides his assets, how he manipulates people. I will not be a bystander in my own life. Julian was sitting at a massive desk, a laptop open before him. He did not look surprised. He simply nodded. I expected as much. He gestured to a chair. My head counsel is on his way. He will brief you daily. You will have final approval on every motion we file. It was not the response she expected. She had prepared for a gentle, paternalistic refusal. Instead, he treated her as a partner, a key asset. It was a disarming tactic. And one more thing, she said, pushing forward before she lost her nerve. I need to work. I can't just exist here. He looked up from his laptop, his gaze analytical. What do you propose? The Obsidian Tower, she said. You said yourself the design has inconsistencies in its execution. That's because Marcus cut corners. He changed materials, altered structural supports to save money, things that compromised the integrity of the design. I want to fix it. I want to show you the building as it was meant to be. A long silence stretched between them. Julian closed his laptop. He stood up and walked to a large velvet-covered board against one wall. With a quiet motion, he pulled back the cover. Pinned to the board were dozens of her drawings, her sketches, her renderings of the tower. He had collected them all. "Show me," he said. And so a new routine began. She would spend her mornings with the children and her afternoons in the library with Julian, a team of his junior architects, and reams of blueprints. She was brilliant. Freed from the oppressive weight of Marcus's ego, her mind sparked and soared. She talked about airflow dynamics, tensile strength, the way light would fall in the atrium at the winter solstice. She spoke with a passion and precision that left the junior architects scribbling notes furiously. Julian rarely spoke during these sessions. He would stand at the back of the room or sit in a wingback chair just watching. He watched her hands as she sketched a new idea on a piece of tracing paper. He watched the way her face lit up when she solved a complex structural problem. He was not watching a potential lover. He was watching a master at her craft. He was a man who appreciated excellence above all else, and Alara, he was discovering, was the very definition of it. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the quiet, devastating machinery of Thorne Industries was grinding Marcus Vance into dust. Julian's assistant, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Zara, who communicated in clipped single-sentence emails, orchestrated the entire campaign, acquired the debt from his primary lender. He is now in default. Purchased the 3 smaller contracting firms he relies on. Their services are no longer available to him. Initiated a forensic audit of his company's tax filings. Found significant irregularities. The actions were precise, legal, and utterly ruinous. Julian was not just defeating Marcus, he was dismantling him, piece by piece, with the cold, impersonal efficiency of a factory recall. The slow burn of their relationship developed in these quiet spaces, in the shared glances over blueprints, in the late-night conversations after the children were asleep, when he would find her in the Dower House kitchen, unable to sleep, her mind still racing with design problems. He would make her tea and they would talk, not about Marcus, but about architecture, about art, about the burden of building things that last. He was not like Marcus. Marcus took. He consumed. Julian observed. He provided a framework, a foundation, and then he stood back and let her build. He was giving her something she hadn't had in a decade. Space. Space to think, to create, to breathe. One evening, he found her in the conservatory. She was standing before a night-blooming cereus, a strange, spidery plant that flowered for only a single night. "My mother loves this one," he said, his voice a low rumble behind her. "She says it reminds her that some of the most beautiful things require a great deal of patience." Alara turned, a small, genuine smile reaching her eyes for the first time. "I don't think I have much patience left." "You have more than anyone I've ever met," he countered, his expression serious. "You have endured. That is a much harder thing than being patient." He did not move closer. He did not try to touch her, but in the warm, humid air of the conservatory, a new kind of structure was being built between them, something quiet and strong, designed to withstand any storm. Marcus Vance lived in a world of his own making, a world built on charm, bluster, and the fundamental belief that rules were for other people. He did not understand the silence from Alara. In his version of the story, she was supposed to crumble. She was supposed to last 3 days, maybe a week, before the reality of her situation, no money, no friends, no power, sent her crawling back to him, begging for forgiveness. "Give her another 48 hours, he told his lawyer, a slick, perpetually nervous man named Peterson. They were in Marcus's penthouse office, a space designed to intimidate, with panoramic views of the city he believed he was about to conquer. "She'll be at the door with the kids in tow. She can't survive without me." Peterson, who had just received a courtesy call informing him that Marcus's primary line of business credit had been frozen, looked less certain. "Marcus, the man whose estate she's on." "Julian Thorne. He's not someone you want to antagonize. We're getting reports that Thorne Industries has been buying up the debt of your suppliers." Marcus waved a dismissive hand. It's a scare tactic. He's trying to play the white knight, impress Alara. He'll get bored. Men like Thorn don't get their hands dirty over a domestic dispute. He thinks he can intimidate me? He has no idea who he's dealing with. The delusion was breathtaking in its scope. Marcus was a man who had only ever fought opponents he knew he could beat. He bullied, he threatened, he cheated. He had never come up against a truly structural power. A power that didn't need to shout, that could ruin a man with a quiet phone call and a signature on a document. He was a playground bully who had just tried to shake down the owner of the playground. Days turned into a week, then 2. The silence from Alara was absolute. His calls went unanswered. His texts were unread. His access to their joint accounts, which were, in reality, his accounts, was suddenly and inexplicably restricted. Contractors stopped returning his calls. The Obsidian Tower project, the linchpin of his entire future, was in jeopardy as Thorn Industries went radio silent. His confidence began to fray at the edges, replaced by a low-grade simmering panic. The world was not conforming to his will. It was Chloe who pushed him over the edge. Her own, much smaller world was also collapsing. The credit cards Marcus had given her were being declined. The promise of being the mistress of the city's most successful new developer was souring into the reality of being attached to a failing, increasingly erratic man. "You have to do something, Marcus," she whined, pacing the white marble floor of the penthouse. "She's making a fool of you, of us. She has your children. People are talking." He needed to reassert control. He needed to force a confrontation. So he did what he always did when he felt his power slipping. He escalated. He instructed Peterson to file an emergency custody motion. The filing was a masterpiece of slanderous fiction. It painted Alara as a mentally unstable, vindictive woman who had abducted her children in a fit of delusion. It cited her flight to a secluded compound as proof of her instability. It was ugly, it was vicious, and it was a public declaration of war. "This will force her out," Marcus declared, slamming a copy of the filing on his desk. "She'll have to respond. She'll have to appear in court. Once I get her in a room, I can handle her." He made a show of trying to serve her the papers himself. He drove his sleek black car back to the imposing gates of the Thorn estate and laid on the horn. He shouted at the intercom. He demanded to see his children. It was a pathetic theatrical display of impotence. No one came out. The gates remained closed. The intercom remained silent. After 20 minutes of his shouting into the void, a local police car pulled up, responding to a disturbance call. The officer, polite but firm, informed Marcus that if he did not leave the premises, he would be arrested for trespassing. The humiliation was absolute. He was spiraling. The carefully constructed edifice of his life was crumbling, and he was flailing, throwing bricks at the man who now owned the quarry. The final, fatal miscalculation came in the form of a thick, cream-colored envelope delivered to his office by a motorcycle courier. Inside was an invitation, embossed in silver. It was for the annual Obsidian Gala, the most prestigious architectural event of the year. It was the very same gala where the winner of the Obsidian Tower contract was to be officially announced. Marcus stared at it, his mind racing. This was it. This was Thorn's move. He wasn't being cut out. He was being tested. This was a power play. Thorn was inviting him into the lion's den to see if he would flinch. He would show him. He would walk in there, head held high, and reclaim his project, his wife, his life. He would confront Alara in a public forum she couldn't run from. He laughed, a dry, cracking sound. "He thinks he's sprung a trap," he said to the empty room. "He has no idea. I'm the one holding the cards." He didn't notice the small print at the bottom of the invitation. It wasn't a standard invitation. It was a summons. And Julian Thorn was a man who always collected on his debts. The trap had been sprung the moment Alara arrived at his gate. This was not the beginning of the confrontation. This was the execution. The Obsidian Gala was the kind of event where power was not just displayed, but consecrated. It was held in the grand ballroom of the city's oldest museum. a cavernous space of marble floors, soaring columns, and ceilings that depicted mythological battles. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, the murmur of enormous sums of money being discussed in hushed tones, and the almost visible shimmer of ambition. Ilara stood on a small, private balcony overlooking the main floor, a glass of champagne untouched in her hand. She wore an emerald green gown, a color Julian had chosen. It was not a dress for hiding. It was a dress that announced its presence. Architecturally precise, it fell in clean, structural lines that highlighted her grace and strength. For the first time in a decade, she felt like the woman who had once designed buildings that scraped the sky. She felt like herself. Julian stood beside her, a quiet, solid presence in a flawless, dark blue suit. He had not touched her all night, save for a light hand on the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd. Yet she felt tethered to him, anchored by his stillness in a sea of motion. "Are you ready?" he asked, his low voice a private conversation in the midst of the public spectacle. "I don't leave because things become complicated," she replied, echoing his own words back to him. A rare, genuine smile graced his lips. "Good." Down below, Marcus Vance was making his entrance. He was not making it well. He was already drunk, his swagger more pronounced, more desperate. His tuxedo was impeccable, but his eyes were wild, darting around the room with a hunter's frantic energy. He was looking for her. He spotted them on the balcony. His face, which had been a mask of forced bonhomie, twisted into a snarl of pure, possessive rage. The fact that she was not broken, that she was not weeping in a corner, but standing beside the most powerful man in the room, looking radiant, was a violation of the natural order of his universe. He began to push his way through the crowd, his movements clumsy and aggressive, jostling titans of industry and their elegant wives without apology. Conversations stuttered and died in his wake. A ripple of discomfort spread from him like a contagion. "He seems warm," Julian noted, his tone so dry it was almost arid. "He's about to be," Ilara murmured, her hand tightening on the balcony railing. Marcus reached the base of the small staircase leading to their private alcove. Two of Julian's discreet security guards moved to block his path. "Let me pass," Marcus snarled. "I need to speak to my wife." The guards did not move. They were polite, impassive walls of muscle and training. From the balcony, Julian spoke, his voice calm, carrying easily in the sudden lull. "Let him up, gentlemen." The guards stepped aside. Marcus stormed up the stairs, his face flushed, his breathing heavy. He ignored Julian completely, his entire focus a laser beam of fury on Ilara. He grabbed her arm, the same proprietary grip from the night at the gate. "What is this? What are you doing here, dressed like that? You belong at home, with my children. You have an obligation to me." The words were a pathetic echo of his power, a ghost of a threat that no longer had any substance. Ilara looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. There was no fear in her eyes, only a cool, distant pity. "Let go of my arm, Marcus." Before he could respond, Julian moved. He did not shout. He did not become aggressive. He simply placed his hand over Marcus's, his touch surprisingly gentle. "I believe the lady asked you to release her," he said. The pressure he applied must have been immense, because Marcus's fingers flew open as if they'd been shocked. Julian calmly removed Marcus's hand from Ilara's arm. He held onto it for a moment, his gaze locking with Marcus's. "You are making a scene," he said softly, "and you are doing it at my party. This was a mistake." At that moment, the lights in the ballroom dimmed, and a spotlight found the main stage. Zara, Julian's assistant, was at the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, your host for this evening, and the chairman of Thorne Industries, Mr. Julian Thorne." Julian released Marcus's hand, patting it twice in a gesture that was both dismissive and deeply insulting. He turned to Ilara. "Wait here," he murmured, before turning and descending the stairs, walking toward the stage with the unhurried gait of a man who owned the very ground he walked on. The crowd applauded. Marcus stood on the balcony, forgotten, a ghost at the feast. He watched, his face a mask of confusion and rage, as Julian took the stage. This was not how this was supposed to go. "Thank you all for coming," Julian began, his voice amplified throughout the vast hall. "We are here tonight to celebrate the future of our city's skyline. We are here to talk about the Obsidian Tower." A murmur of anticipation went through the crowd. Marcus watched, his fists clenching and unclenching. He was still waiting for his name to be called. "For months," Julian continued, "my company has been engaged in a rigorous selection process. We have been in negotiations with a developer, Mr. Marcus Vance." He paused, and his eyes found Marcus standing on the balcony, pinning him in a searchlight of attention. "Mr. Vance presented us with a vision, a bold, breathtaking vision." Marcus straightened up, a flicker of triumphant hope in his eyes. This was it. "However," Julian said, and the word hung in the air, sharp as a shard of glass. "A vision is only as strong as the foundation it is built upon. And the foundation of Mr. Vance's proposal, we discovered, was built on sand, on deceit, on theft." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the faint clinking of ice in 1,000 glasses. Julian gestured to the massive screen behind him. It flickered to life, not with architectural renderings, but with a document, an acquisition notice. "As of 9 a.m. this morning," Julian announced, his voice a cool, steady instrument of destruction, "Thorn Industries completed its acquisition of the holding company that owns Vance Development. Every asset, every contract, every piece of paper with his name on it." The screen changed, a list of shell corporations, all marked, ownership transferred to Thorn Industries. The screen changed again, a copy of the deed to Marcus's penthouse, lien placed by Thorn Industries. "The debt he accrued, the partners he betrayed, the promises he broke. I now hold all of it," Julian said. He was not angry. He was simply stating facts. He was reading an obituary. "Mr. Vance no longer has a company. He no longer has a project. As of this evening, he no longer has a home to go back to. He has nothing." Marcus made a sound, a choked, strangled gasp. His face had gone from red to a pasty, bloodless white. His legs seemed to buckle. He gripped the balcony railing for support. But Julian wasn't finished. "He also filed a legal action this week," Julian said, his voice dropping, becoming more personal, more damning. "An action to take custody of his children, claiming their mother was unfit. A woman he has systematically erased, exploited, and abused for a decade." The final image appeared on the screen. It was not a document. It was a photograph. A candid shot of Alara in the Thorn Library, her face alive with passion and intelligence, explaining a complex blueprint to a rapt audience of architects. The public downfall was absolute. Marcus's knees gave out. He did not just fall. He collapsed, a puppet whose strings had been cut, crumpling to the floor of the balcony in a heap of rented finery. He was sobbing, not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, heaving, guttural sobs of a man whose entire world had been vaporized in the space of 90 seconds. Security, Julian's men, were there instantly. They did not drag him. They helped him up with a kind of professional pity, supporting his boneless weight as they escorted him from the balcony, out of the ballroom, out of the life he had stolen. The crowd watched in stunned, horrified silence. On the stage, Julian Thorn watched him go. He waited until the doors had swung shut behind the ruined man. Then he turned back to the microphone, his composure perfect, his control absolute. The execution was complete. In the ringing silence that followed Marcus's removal, Julian's voice once again filled the hall. It was calm, measured, a point of stability in the wake of the storm he had unleashed. "There has been a great deal of speculation about the Obsidian Tower," he said, turning his attention back to the audience as if the preceding demolition had been a minor piece of housekeeping. "But the vision was never in question, only the visionary." His gaze lifted, finding Alara where she stood on the balcony, alone now in the spotlight's glow. The crowd followed his gaze, their heads turning as one. She stood perfectly still, her emerald gown a beacon of life and color, her expression unreadable. She was no longer a victim. She was a revelation. The brilliance of the obsidian tower was never the work of Marcus Vance, Julian declared, his voice resonating with an authority that no one in the room dared to question. It was the work of a person who was rendered invisible, a person whose talent was taken, whose name was erased, whose contributions were claimed by a lesser man. She has been the most capable person in every room she has ever been in, and no one thought to give her credit. He extended a hand toward the balcony. It was not a command, it was an invitation, an offering. Tonight, that ends. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to correct the record. I would like to introduce the true architect of the Obsidian Tower, the creative force who will bring it to life, and the new head of the Thorn Architectural Division, Ilara Vance. He said her name, her real name. And the sound of it, spoken with such reverence and authority in that grand hall, was like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known she was trapped behind. For a heart-stopping moment, she did not move. Then she took a breath, a deep, slow, steady breath. She descended the stairs, her movements graceful and sure. The entire room was on its feet, the silence broken by a wave of applause that was more than polite. It was thunderous. It was cathartic. It was for her. She walked onto the stage and stood beside Julian. He did not try to speak for her. He stepped back, ceding the spotlight, the moment, entirely to her. She looked out at the sea of faces, the most powerful and influential people in the city, all of them looking at her, really seeing her, for the first time. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and strong, amplified by the microphone but needing no amplification in its quiet power. "Let's get to work." Later, long after the last of the guests had departed, after the reporters had been given their official statements and the ballroom was once again quiet and empty, they stood on the museum's rooftop terrace. The city spread out before them, a glittering tapestry of light and shadow. The air was cool, carrying the clean scent of the receding storm. Ilara leaned against the stone parapet, looking out at the skyline she would soon forever change. The weight that had settled in her bones for a decade, a constant, crushing presence, was gone. It had not just been lifted, it had been annihilated. In its place was a quiet, expansive peace. She felt light enough to float. "Was all of that?" she began, gesturing vaguely toward the now empty ballroom. "Necessary?" Julian came to stand beside her, his shoulder almost brushing hers. He built his career by humiliating people in private. It seemed only fitting that he should lose it by being humiliated in public. Some lessons require a grand stage. He paused, his gaze fixed on the horizon. And you required a grand introduction. Your talent deserves no less. She turned to look at him. In the soft glow of the city lights, the hard edges of his face were softened. The quiet sovereign, the ruthless titan of finance, looked peaceful. "You didn't have to do any of this," she said softly. "The house, the lawyers, tonight?" "Yes, I did," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I am a man who builds things. I cannot abide a flawed foundation. And I cannot abide seeing true value underestimated." He finally turned his head, his winter sky eyes meeting hers. "When I first saw the plans for the tower, I knew I was looking at the work of a master. When I met the person who created them, I knew I was right." He reached out, his fingers gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was not possessive. It was reverent. It was the first time he had initiated such a gesture, and the simple, gentle contact sent a tremor of warmth through her that had nothing to do with passion and everything to do with recognition. A real smile, one that had been absent for years, finally reached her eyes. It transformed her face, chasing away the last of the shadows. "And what about you, Julian Thorn? What do you get out of all this?" "I get to watch you build your tower," he said simply. "And my mother is already annoyed that she has to share you with the company. She says you're a better chess partner than I am. She gets that from you, the annoyance. Ilara laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound that echoed in the quiet night air. The dry wit was so unexpected, so perfectly placed, it was like finding a hidden garden in the middle of a fortress. They stood in comfortable silence for a long time, two sovereign powers looking out over their new territory. It was not a fairy tale ending. It was something far more real, more substantial. It was a beginning, earned and paid for. My mother had the dower house aired out and asked me to inquire if your new position comes with a formal title, Julian said, breaking the silence. And what did you tell her? Ilara asked, playing along. I told her I would have to consult with the head of the department. He turned to her fully, his expression serious once more, but with a new warmth in its depths. The children are settling in well. Leo has informed me that the structural integrity of the treehouse is suboptimal and has presented me with 3 different redesign proposals. Mia has decided my mother should be referred to as Queen Anne and has appointed herself lady-in-waiting. Ilara smiled. They are resilient. They are safe, he corrected. It allows them to be resilient. He paused, the moment stretching, becoming something more. They have a school play next month, a ridiculously ahistorical thing about dragons and pilgrims. Leo is a dragon. Mia is a talking pumpkin. They are asking if I will be there. It was not a declaration of love. It was something more profound. It was a question about the future, framed in the mundane, beautiful reality of a new family being built, not from passion and promises, but from honesty, complication, and the daily choice to show up. Are you? Ilara asked, her voice soft. His eyes held hers, a steady, unwavering gaze. I don't leave when things become complicated, he said. It was a promise, the most important one he could make. She reached out and took his hand, his fingers laced with hers, a comfortable, solid fit. Together, they looked out at the city, at the spot on the skyline where a void currently existed. Soon, the obsidian tower would rise there, a testament to her vision, her strength, her endurance. A building made of glass and steel, built on a foundation of unassailable truth.